Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 38 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you from the international headquarters of GSM Services and looking forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week and have Michelle Petty with us. Michelle is the Community Outreach Liaison with Gaston Hospice. Michelle, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
All right, we're going to get right to it. So if you don't mind, we'll just start. You kind of tell us a little bit about yourself or anything that you'd like to share.
Well, I moved to Gaston County about 15 years ago. I'm married, 3 grown children, 5 grandchildren, and 1 more on the way. And I love this town.
All right, well, very good. So you said you had 5 grandchildren and 1 on the way?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
They're all little. It's a blast.
I'm assuming you spoil them and send them back to the parents, right?
Totally.
All right, that's perfect. So you mind sharing, how did you end up involved with the Gaston Hospice, or how did you get here? And maybe even, I don't know that we sent this question, I always forget this, but maybe even, do you know the history of Gaston Hospice locally? But anything you'd like to share how you ended up there?
Well, I do know some of the history because I helped to write some of the history and I keep up with it for Gaston Hospice. So that's exciting. So I was a traveling salesperson for another company, and I felt like I was always out of the city. I was never located here, and when I came back home, I never got involved, and so I decided to start looking for a local job. And Caramont just seemed to be a good place to start looking because I had a non-clinical medical background, so I started looking there and came across Gaston Hospice. And actually, I did not know much about hospice services until I came to them, and it's probably one of the most wonderful organizations I've ever worked with. It is a nonprofit, so I'm very proud of that. And I love nonprofit work, so that always is a pull for me. And I once I became where my job was in the city and I could become more involved, I decided my first line of service to this community would be on the Historic Neighborhood Board of Directors. And I chaired in 2010 and 2012 the Christmas home tours, if you're familiar with those in the historic district.
Yep, I do remember some of that, yes.
It's a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot of great people through that. Writing history for Gaston Hospice, of course, I learned a lot of the pioneers and those kinds of things of people that have just totally paved ways for this county in so many different ways, even more so than just Gaston Hospice.
So how long has Gaston Hospice been around? Do you know that?
So Reverend Robert Johnson started a meeting with a group of people that he got together in 1979.
Okay.
And hospice is a fairly young organization. It actually only came over to the United States in 1974. So wouldn't you consider that a pioneer paver?
Yes.
Yeah, he was definitely a trailblazer. And so he got together some of the prominent people in this town, and they pushed forward with this concept. And they had Eleanor Beasley, which many of you know.
Yes.
She was a great pioneer as well, and they hired her in 1981. They opened the doors, and they had hospice patients immediately with this new concept of...
So Eleanor was the first executive director? Or
she was.
Okay.
I
think I actually knew that. We're in Rotary together, so I've known her for many, many years. What can you tell our listeners about the mission, or how would you describe the mission of Gaston Hospice?
So the mission of Gaston Hospice is one to parallel with Caramont, to provide compassionate, exceptional, and highly reliable care to our patients. And then we go one step further as a hospice and say at the end of life, and then we help them with the best quality of life that they can have through their journey. Okay.
That's a pretty big mission there, Michelle. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm not sure this is the right wording. Can you maybe describe some of the initiatives or programs, or what is it that the organization is doing on a day-to-day basis? I'm not sure the best way to describe that.
Well, so Gaston Hospice has a team of experts that go in to see our patients. So we are our teams are managed by an RN, and then they have a social worker on that team, a bereavement counselor on that team for after the patient passes. We still take care of that family for 13 months, and that's kind of huge,
right.
because as you know, well, you may not know, but once a loved one passes, then you're left. And the first holiday you have to spend without that person, we help you get through those things.
Yeah, it's a long year of firsts.
It is a long year of firsts.
Yes, my family has experienced that.
Yeah. So our team just is amazing, and they help our patients navigate that, our patients' families navigate that, and help to write their story at the end of life and make it the best we can make it.
Is it fair to say, I mean, simply you're just kind of helping these families navigate, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better phrase, this traumatic event that's coming maybe, or that all families may have to deal with at one time or another, and kind of help them navigate, because for most, I mean, who knows? Well, I mean, I remember when my family experienced it the first time, we had no idea what to do, so that comfort and information and just that hand holding, I guess that kind of went along with it was very, very comforting. So yeah, so twice now my family directly has had experience with hospice, and once in fact in my own home with my father-in-law when he was diagnosed with cancer. So I'm familiar with kind of how it operates. How can I say this? It's both kind of good and bad. It's an organization that helps people get through a bad situation better. Maybe that's a new motto for hospice I just made up, Amy. Okay. So I really like this next question, Michelle, and I think you I'm sure you have lots of these, or your organization does, but can you give a specific example or anecdotal story or something where you witnessed or of where hospice really helped an individual family?
Okay, get your Kleenex ready because I'm going to tell you this story.
Okay.
And forgive me because I typically cry through this one too. And
understood.
Even when I came to hospice, my children were like, "Mom, do you really think this is a good place for you? You cry at the drop of a hat." And on every movie you ever watch, I'm like,
oh, man.
I know. But it's good to cry. It's good to cry. And I cry with our staff all the time. So we had a young man that was probably 20 when he entered our palliative program. And I will explain the difference between palliative and hospice in a few minutes. But he entered our palliative program. He was not at the end of life. He was still taking extremely life-giving medications that were helping him to get through his disease process. When he was 18, he wanted to enter the service, and so he went down to enlist. And they found that he had a hereditary heart disease that they would not allow him to enter because of it. So then they had to start seeking medical treatment for this young man. Well, it was much worse than they had anticipated at his young age, and it progressed quickly. And so that's how we got him in the palliative program. And so when he decided he was exhausted and he did not want to take these life-giving drugs anymore, he transitioned into the hospice family. But before he did that, our palliative team works very closely with our hospice team, and they wanted to give this young man his dream come true. So our team went to the National Guard here in Gaston County and worked with them to give him a special day. They gave him a uniform with his name on it. They put him in the tanks. He got to hold the guns. He got to get in the trucks. He got to drive around, and his face was beaming. And he left with his uniform on, and they gave him that day. And it was so precious that our staff cared enough to give this young man that last little answer to his lifelong dream that he had that he knew would never be fulfilled, and we fulfilled it for a day. And those guys stay in touch with that family, and they really did it up for that young man, and we were all touched by that.
All right, so now hospice is in part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation too? I mean, that's quite, I'm kidding, okay, but that's what that sounds like, right? It sounds like you just, and that I think that's typical of caring organizations and caring individuals, right? What else can we do?
Exactly.
Is a question that I often hear with organizations and individuals who are so focused on caring for others. And you're right. There's no video here, but if you looked over there, Amy is crying over there in the corner. But I mean, that is a cry-worthy story. So
if you saw the face, it would definitely be amazing.
But again, I also know enough about hospice. I'm sure there's hundreds of stories, maybe not quite to that extreme, but just hundreds of stories of hospice, helping, as I mentioned earlier, families kind of navigating some serious circumstances and kind of helping ease what those families are having to deal with. So
if you can only imagine a couple being married for 60 years and their loved one is fading, and they just want to sit there and hold their hand. But then in comes our staff and holds the hand with them.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's an amazing organization. What we love about hospice is we have the time to spend with those families, where if those patients were in the hospital, they don't get the same quality of time that they can get at their home. And we serve people in wherever they live. If they live in a skilled nursing facility, we go there and stay, and assisted living facilities. We serve Covenant Village, and we are out there every day.
So it might be hard to top that as we go forward today. But can you share? And you've already shared many things, but is there something else that you can think of, maybe that you're most proud of seeing accomplished, or something that Hospice has done, or something since you've been involved with the organization?
So since I've been involved with the organization, the community helped build the hospice house, and many of you are familiar with the Robin Johnson House, which was, of course, named after our great pioneer, Reverend Robin Johnson. And our community got together. There were spearheaders, Janie Peak. I could name them all, but please forgive me because I didn't bring my notes. But they spearheaded getting these donations to get that house built, and they built it with love. And when you go out there, if you've ever had a patient or a friend or a loved one out there, you know that house was built with love. You can feel it in the walls. It's something about it that is just so amazing. And the staff out there is amazing that they do this every day for these families. They hold their hand.
I have been out there. It's a great facility, a great location, and a great facility.
And that's what I say I'm most proud of. Our community built that, and they continue to give through the donations to keep our organization up and running.
How long has the Robin Johnson House been there?
So it was opened in 2006.
Okay.
And then we put our addition on in 2013, I think it was.
Okay.
Maybe
Very
14.
Good. Yeah, I knew it had been things like that. It's always longer than I think. When we look back on things like that. So remember, this is a podcast about why Gaston County is great, and you've shared a lot of reasons already. But maybe in your own words, why would you say Gaston County is better because hospice is here?
Well, like you said,
I think I just stumped. Did I just stump you with that question?
No, I'm good. Yes, I'm regrouping my thoughts. But again, our community helping take care of people at the end of the life is an honor and a privilege. And we want to always do that with dignity and give that patient that dignity back. And so to do that, our community is stronger because they invite us in. And as Dr. Case used to put it so well, he used to say, it's their dance and they've invited us to it. So let's do the best we can do. And of course, we say this all the time too, that in hospice, there's no opportunity to do it over. There are no do-overs in hospice.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a great point.
It right the first time, because we can't let these families down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never viewed it that way, but you're exactly right. Wow. So you're looking ahead. Can you, how do you envision the organization looking like here locally in the next 5 to 10 years? Any big plans or just in general?
Well, we do have big plans. I can't share them yet because they're in the works. But when they come out, have me back.
Okay,
I'll be
we
glad
sure
to
will.
tell you. But the good news is we would like to serve these patients much earlier than we get them. And
Okay.
the number one thing that families say in their survey that they get afterwards is, what would you say you'd do differently if you knew? And they always say, I would have called hospice sooner.
Okay.
And so, we have to speak to that. We want to be called in sooner. We have a team that comes in that, as you well know, we bring a social worker that can help with the advanced directives at the end of life. That's the planning that, who's going to speak for you when you can no longer speak for yourself. Things like that. We have so much to offer. We can give that family respite care. So if you're in the home taking care of your loved one, we can give you 5 days of respite care where your loved one goes to the Robin Johnson House for 5 days, paid for by the hospice benefit in most insurances as well as Medicare. So we can really help. We just really would like to get that word out there to call us sooner. We have so many that call us on the 11th hour.
Yeah.
And we have people, we had one of our most wonderful volunteers came to us, and she was amazing, went to patients' homes for us, did anything I asked of her. And I said to her one day, how long did we actually have your husband? And she looked at me and she said, not even a whole day. And I was like, oh my goodness. And she goes, and y'all made that much of an impact on us. And I'll be here volunteering because of it.
Yeah, my two personal experiences, one was, a diagnosis that occurred over a number of months. And so I think we actually progressed from the palliative type care to the hospice care over a number of months. But the second experience was the diagnosis was very late, and it was really not even a week and a half maybe of total time. But anyway, so I can see your point there about how, and I'm sure every situation is different. And I'm sure maybe my first time around too, I think from my personal experiences, we almost didn't want to do it because, we were almost like we were admitting this is what's coming,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And so looking back, I maybe have thought, maybe had some of those thoughts. I think that first time around, of course, the second time around, yeah, we do wish it had been sooner if we had known.
Because calling hospice doesn't mean giving up.
Correct.
So
maybe that first time around when we were just maybe that's kind of how we felt maybe initially, mm-hmm. not after a few weeks of interacting with hospice, we didn't feel that way any longer. But yeah, I think beforehand, before we really had any direct experience with it, I think that's kind of how we felt.
Well, because you're making that decision for your loved one. Your loved one's not making that decision for them, and it's your first go round with us. You don't know. Are we going to come in and just say, okay, they are dying, goodbye, and we don't show back up? But we don't do that. And we like to get to the patient earlier because of that, because there is hope in hospice. What kind of hope do we give? Well, like I said earlier, we give hope to those family members to hold their hand through this, to say, okay, this is what's coming next. Everyone wants to know, is it time? Are they close? We don't actually know the answer of that, but we do know what to look for that, and we'll walk you through that. We know when they're, at the last week. We know when they're at the last 2 days, 72 hours, something like that. We can kind of gauge it by how they're progressing in the disease. We don't know. Only God knows, but we do like to help you navigate that. And you feel like you're giving up on a loved one because you think, well, if we call hospice, they're going to die. But that is not the case. We help people live well and have quality of life until their end. We're not about the quantity, how much, can we give them 3 more months? But the reality of that is when you call in hospice, studies have been done that they live 30 days longer with hospice than without it because we get them out of pain. I always kind of tell this little side story about, when you have back pain, you're kind of grumpy, and everybody around you kind of knows because you're like,
Yeah.
And, then you take a little bit of a muscle relaxer and you're feeling better, and everybody knows you're better. So that's kind of how we are when we come in and we help that patient manage that pain. They get better. And then they can enjoy those times with those grandchildren and those, family members, have that one more Christmas with their loved one and that kind of thing, because we got them out of that pain that was agitating and irritating and causing their, agitation.
Right. All right. So this kind of staying on some of the specifics there. I mean, how would someone refer a patient to hospice? I mean, how does that occur?
So that's a super good question. Anyone can refer someone. So, for instance, you could call us about your father-in-law and say, hey, my father-in-law needs you guys to come out. So we can do that without a sign-off from their medical provider. But in the end, we need that medical provider to say, yes, this patient is hospice appropriate and 6 months or less is their prognosis. And then we'll admit them. So if we come before that's done, it's called a preliminary admission. We can look at it and tell you what we need to do. Almost always we get the provider's permission to go ahead and admit the patient.
My two experiences were directly from the medical provider.
Okay, great.
That our families dealt with.
And that can happen too. We can have them send the referral right over to us, and we'll get right on it and get a admission nurse out there to get that patient admitted. And if you know anything about our wonderful Heather, our admission nurse, she's amazing. Our families love her, and she explains the process. So then they're at ease, like, okay, good, I'm not hastening their death by bringing in hospice, because that's what you think.
You think some wild things, yes. Mm-hmm. It's just such an emotional, just such an emotional time. Yep. Well, and there's no playbook for it or everybody, yeah.
So true. We call it a crisis time, too, because 9 times out of 10, well, I shouldn't say 9 times out of 10, but probably 7 to 10 times we're called in a crisis mode. Like the family realizes, this is it. We need to call hospice. We need to get somebody over here now, and so then we go over there. And yourself, that navigating a crisis is a little bit more difficult than navigating a family going into to listen to what you have to say.
Right.
So I say call us early, and we'll get out there and see if they're appropriate.
You may have touched on this already, but what determines if a patient is appropriate for hospice care, or if it's time? Maybe you already mentioned that already.
Well, so what's appropriate is we're looking at a 6-month prognosis of the disease process or less. The difference between the palliative and the hospice is simple, and I'll make it as quick as possible. Palliative can come in at any part of the disease process, especially while you're seeking curative treatments such as chemotherapy, you're still on dialysis, those kinds of things. Palliative can come in and help those patients with that pain those symptoms that they're experiencing through those curative methods, because we all know that some of those have additional pain to them. So palliative can come in, and palliative can come in as early as needed. And that, again, is up to a provider to put that palliative order in for that patient. We don't just do cancer. We do, right now we're doing all the 3 C's, we call it: COPD, congestive heart failure, and cancer. But we also do ALS, liver, renal diseases, and more in the palliative. So what else happens in the palliative is you get a team of a provider, a nurse, and a social worker if needed. But those guys only come out 1 to 3 months. So they're looking at the medications and how they can help this patient get through and navigate the progression of this disease, but yet prolonging it with the curative treatments. Hospice, on the other hand, is once a patient has reached the end of the curative treatments and they have decided to focus on comfort care. The big difference between hospice and palliative is the hospice team will come weekly, sometimes 3 times a week if needed. We send in a CNA, which is a person that's going to help with the personal care for that patient. We can schedule that. We can schedule social workers regularly to come talk to the family or the patient. The chaplains are there if needed. So it's a whole team with hospice, whereas with palliative, it's just 1 or 2 visits every other month or so to keep that patient knowing where they're at. Okay. And then also the good thing is when a patient is in palliative, the palliative team is watching for that transition. Like 3 years down the road, the palliative team says, wow, they're at the end of this curative treatment and we need to start talking. And so then the palliative team is great at talking about that because that's not an easy conversation.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's actually, and that's a tough, that's why, you know, even the palliative side, you need those, I guess, professionals around they've dealt with it before.
Yes.
And many times the family has never dealt with it before.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing that those were really good, great information there, because again, someone may have to deal with this. Hopefully not anytime soon. So is there anything else I haven't asked or should have asked about hospice, or anything else you'd like to share before we shift gears just briefly?
Well, if anyone would like to be a volunteer for hospice, we would love to have you. You can call our office and ask for our volunteer coordinator. She can get you set up. And then if you're looking for a career with us, you can go to our Caramount website under the tab Careers and then plug in the word hospice, and you'll see everything that's available.
Yeah, so if you go search, I think when I Googled hospice just to get a little more research to try to be more detailed, it is part of the Caramount website,
yes.
right?
Yes, and it's not a standalone.
Yeah, that's caramount.org, I think. Is that right? Okay. So
and just plug in hospice up in the tab.
And we'll be sure to make sure we share that and kind of revisit that before we finish up the podcast. But we're going to shift gears here slightly, and this is really go through this these questions that this is really what your family and your coworkers are going to really want to know about you. This is the reason they're going to listen.
True story.
It's so they can find out the answer to these questions here. So again, we're going to call this. We're just going to stick with the standard name this week. I mean, I change it every week, but we're going to stick with this is our Gaston County speed round of questions for you, Michelle.
I love it.
So the first question is, what is your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
My favorite is strawberry. And just so you know, put a plug in for Tony's Ice Cream, being not a true Gastonian, born and raised here, I bring everyone that comes to visit me to Tony's Ice Cream.
That's a good
start.
stop.
And it's their experience of experiences. I hope it never changes.
That is a good place to bring family or people visiting that are not from here.
Yeah, and that hot fudge cake ice cream, woo! I got a friend that's what she gets every time.
Wow. All right. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
All right, so I'm a Sundrop girl.
All right. What about your favorite local restaurant?
So my favorite local restaurant is Tequila's.
Okay.
You can see me there probably 3 times a week.
Tequila's is good. How about your favorite outdoor activity in Gaston County?
So I love to water ski and be on a lake. That's my favorite outdoor activity. And then Rankin Lake is probably the most fun for my grandchildren.
Okay.
And then this wonderful grandmother loves to ride the zip line. I'm just saying, like, they crack up laughing when grandma gets on the zip line.
Wow, that's terrific. Wow.
They don't get to call me grandma, though, because I refuse to be that old.
Well, it sounds like you're staying young with
I am working
water
on it.
skiing and zip lining. Gee, I don't even do that.
And I taught my oldest grandson how to snow ski.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm working on my other ones. They're too little yet.
Okay, well, I'm sure it'll be pretty soon. They don't have any idea what they're getting into.
Yeah.
So here's
Take him on the Black Diamond.
Oh my goodness. So this is my question I'll throw in here, and I might throw a little twist in it on this.
Okay.
This week, but UNC, Duke, NC State, or maybe Methodist?
Oh, Methodist College. Yeah, that's where I worked and graduated from. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's an awesome place.
My little research there was correct.
Very good.
So I'll let you use Methodist since I brought it up, but I am going to still make you choose between those other 3.
So, yeah, well, I'm the kind of person that always fights for an underdog. So whoever's losing is who I'm going for, because my family is adamant about who they're for. So they don't like it when I'm going for the underdog.
So that means if you're pulling for the underdog, pretty much NC State is always the underdog, unfortunately. So we'll take that. I'll take that as you kind of covertly answered NC State. So
yes.
That's how.
I love it.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that appropriately timed sound effect.
Yes, thank you.
Michelle, what is something very few people know about you?
So I'm an interior designer on the side. I recently finished a job that was tearing down walls and putting up new walls and
oh wow,
designing a kitchen, living room, dining room.
So you're like a Renaissance woman. Between snow skiing and zip lining and water skiing and interior design.
Well, that does sound like I know a little bit about everything,
Good
but
gracious.
Really only a little bit about everything. That's about it.
So how about, you got a book or something you would recommend for our readers?
A book I would recommend.
Well, the question is actually, blog or article or anything that you would recommend. I'd just like to, and if you're not a reader, you have to make something up.
Yeah, I wish my friend Emily Craig was here right now. She'd tell me what book. She's an Advent reader. I read mainly the Bible, and then I read books that great people like Spurgeon and them have written to get that's where my heart is. So
Okay.
It's kind of hard to say. There's a book called Angel Armies. If you know anything about angels, it's an awesome book.
All right. Angel Armies.
Angel Armies.
Okay. We'll make a note of that. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you indulging us on those Gaston County questions and some couple of personal questions. We've got a couple more questions, and we'll wrap this up. This has been extremely good. So, Michelle, besides Gaston Hospice, of course, many other things, but why, besides Gaston Hospice, why would you say Gaston County is such a great place?
Well, like I said, there's lots of great people here that I've met. And like if I even start to name them, I'd leave somebody out. So
Sure.
I don't dare want to do that. But I have just been welcomed into this town from the time I arrived here.
Okay.
And that is something that was precious to me, because you don't receive that everywhere. And I've traveled a lot. My husband's job has taken us many places. And actually, Gastonia is the place he's left me the longest. Thank you, Lord. I'm very thankful for that. But, I've met people from all over the world, and I can say the Gaston County people have been the most hospitable to me and brought me in and made me a friend.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that.
Yes.
And I would agree. I think Gaston County is unique and is a very welcoming place. So this is a question I really like. So just looking back just a few years, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, just a few years. That's an easy one because it was just a few years.
Yeah.
So I'm one of these kind of people that has a never give up attitude. I've been accused by several people that know me that I don't hear the word no. That when someone tells me no, I'm like, oh, that's a good maybe. I should still pursue that. They say that's a good thing for a salesperson. I don't know. But anyway, so I never give up. I always think there's hope. I always think there's a path. I always think there's a way to pursue something. And I always strive to be your best and help others be their best. That's what I enjoy most, is helping other people achieve what they want to achieve as well. I know you know Zig Ziglar is the one that came up with that. It's not Michelle Petty that made that up.
Well, it's okay to,
But that's how you can be your best, is helping others achieve their best.
Yeah, Zig has got a lot of good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's another book. There we go.
Yeah.
The Zig Ziglar book.
Yes. So, Michelle, this has really been good. So, again, the main point here is to make our listeners or anybody who maybe hears this podcast for the first time and maybe learn something about hospice. We've mentioned it already, but anything else you'd like to share? Any events coming up, or just reiterate how to get in contact, or what kind of volunteer opportunities? You mentioned volunteers, but what kind of specific volunteer opportunities might be available, and And we want to make sure that's the main point here is to make people aware of Gaston Hospice.
Well, so we have volunteers that help us with our events, and that is always so helpful. We have the annual golf tournament that we do once a year. We have a new person that's working with us on our fundraising, so more to come on that as well.
Okay.
And we have, many of you already know, we have the brick pavers that we put at the Robin Johnson House that you can purchase for your loved one as a memorial, and that's a way to remember your loved one, especially through the Christmas holiday or sometime when a holiday or one of those firsts is coming up and you want to remember them. A brick paver, brick marker is what we call it, is probably a great way to do it. And you can call me at the office, Michelle Petty, and I can walk you through that process if you'd like to be a part of that. But thank you, Gaston County, so much for how much you do for us through the memorials we receive for your loved ones and just the donations that come pouring in regularly for us. We are so grateful. We could not make our organization as great without you. So thank you, Gaston County.
Well, very good. Well, again, I appreciate you sharing that, and to your listeners out there, you have heard ways to get involved, and so please remember Gaston Hospice. If you haven't had a personal connection or experience with hospice, there's a good chance that maybe sometime you will, and so just remember that they provide a terrific service to our community here, and not just Gaston Hospice obviously is located here in Gaston County, but hospice serves. The broader organization serves other areas as well. So, Michelle, I greatly appreciate your time. This has been terrific. So we're going to finish up with my own book recommendation that I do every week and my kind of quote or thought to finish off the week. And I'm shifting gears a little bit with my book this week. I'm kind of focused on what we do here at GSM, and our business is customer service based. And there's a great what I call an older customer service book called Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles. It's kind of one of the first books I ever read about customer service and how to serve individuals better. And, it kind of relates to, ultimately, guess what Gaston Hospice is doing. They're serving individuals and families. And so, again, I would strongly recommend that book. I think it was written in the early 90s. And my quote of the week is one that I really like from Helen Keller. If you're not familiar with Helen Keller, I would encourage you listeners to go kind of do some research and look into her. But she said, "Never bend your head, always hold it high, look the world straight in the eye."
Wow.
So, for me, that's just, you're going to deal with all kinds of things, but keep your head high and don't back down. I didn't plan that, but it's kind of similar to what Michelle just talked about as well, right? Perseverance and don't give up. And I think that's one reason I really like that quote very much. So
very apropos from a blind person saying that.
Oh, absolutely. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us at our email at podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please follow us on our social media platforms. And I think you can get, again, I say this every week, according to Elizabeth, a 5-star rating will help us get noticed on those podcast platforms, those social media platforms and the podcast platforms. So we would greatly appreciate that. And you know what, frankly, we don't get a lot of emails. So share with us, share on social media, our Facebook page, Instagram. Share with us any topics or guests or organizations you think we should have on. So please do that. And a really big thanks to Michelle from Gaston Hospice.
Thank you so much
for being our guest today. I was
honored.
It was a terrific program. So Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Elizabeth King from GSM Services and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.